comic book characters you may or may not know about. This is Mr. Miracle, specifically Thaddeus Brown, the first Mr. Miracle. So to start, Thaddeus was a circus performer / escape artist who started using the name Mr. Miracle. He was the first person to use the name Mr. Miracle, and he earned a modest living doing it, as well as continuing to do it into his later years. Brown met Scott Free when he was practicing an outside escape trick with his friend and assistant, Oberon. While Thaddeus was being threatened by Intergang, Scott showed up and helped him fight them off. However, unknown to Scott, Intergang was an Earth Earth criminal organization created by Darkseid. Brown then told Scott that he was being harassed by one of Intergang's heavy hitters named Steelhand. So Thaddeus and Steelhand had been in the hospital together, and Steelhand had bet Thaddeus that he couldn't escape death. While he was attempting this trick right here, which was him being bolted to a tree and a missile being launched at him, he was shot and killed by one of Intergang's snipers. After his murder, Scott put on Mr. Miracle's costume to exact revenge on Steelhand with the help of another person who was under Thaddeus' care, Shiloh Norman. He also hired Oberon as his manager, and he and Barda had went on as the Mr. Miracle Super Escape Artist show, basically continuing on with whatever Thaddeus Brown was doing. And also, Thaddeus Brown was one of the teachers of Bruce Wayne, because why not? The second Mr. Miracle, of course, was Scott Free, and Scott is a new god, and he is the god of freedom. So Scott is the son of the High Father of New Genesis, and New Genesis and Apocalypse were at war, and so to basically have a truce between the two worlds, they agreed, the leaders, High Father and Darkseid, had agreed to trade sons. So Orion was traded for Scott. However, as you could imagine, the peace between the two was not very long, because at one point when Scott does escape, it restarts the war. But this is on Prime Earth, so Prime Earth Scott, they just started back to war on their own. While he was on Apocalypse, Scott was at Granny Goodness's orphanage, which was basically a torture camp where he met Barda. While he was there, of course, he used his punishment time and all of the things he was being tortured for to practice his escape art. So after, he escapes from Apocalypse and he runs into Thaddeus, Thaddeus gets killed and he becomes the new Mr. Miracle, he and Barda do get married. However, sometime later, he was recaptured by Darkseid and forced to be the sentient host for the Black Racer for an extended period of time before he was able to escape the control. During the Justice League Darkseid War storyline, Mr. Miracle had infiltrated Apocalypse, went to Darkseid's throne to see if he could find out, what exactly the plans were. While he did find out this information, he was also discovered by Darkseid, and they got into a fight and he was wounded. However, he was able to boom tube away. As soon as he landed on Earth, he came up against Kanto and Lashina. During his fight with the both of them, he was nearly killed again, but he was able to boom tube away again. This time he landed in front of a super mysterious woman who was offering him the chance to join her in a war against Darkseid. She said that killing, that the war was the only way to kill Darkseid, but it would cost 1 billion lives. However, he did not agree with this, and when he told her he didn't agree and he was basically turning her down, she tried to kill him. Who was the mysterious woman, you ask? Marina Black or Grail's mother. She did manage to almost kill him yet again for the third time in a row, but he was able to boom tube away again. This time he landed on the Rock of Eternity, finally coming in contact with the Justice League so that he could explain exactly what was going on, and he noticed that Metron was there in Mobius's chair. They did manage to stop Darkseid, working together. And before he left, Mr. Miracle immobilized Metron. So in the battle with Darkseid, Mr. Miracle was going up against Kanto, and Darkseid was killed by the Anti-Monitor. And then Mr. Miracle was trying to basically explain to the new host of the Black Racer, that death is not even beyond him, really. So after the death of Darkseid, Kanto engaged Mr. Miracle in battle and almost killed him until, of course, Big Barda had boom tubed in the way to stop them. He was really concerned with how they were going to perceive Barda and Mr. Miracle being together, but she really didn't give a shit, and she gave him a kiss, told him she loved him, and went off on her way to go fight other people. Barda did try to make a deal with Lashina and the rest of the Furies, but they were like, no, we're still going to try to come find you and kill you. After it was all said and done, their next goal, Justice League and Mr. Miracle and Barda, was to defeat Mobius. However, they realized when it came down to it, they needed the Crime Syndicate's help, so they ended up at Belle Reve. The reason that they needed the Crime Syndicate's help was the Crime Syndicate was the only one who was able to help them fight Mobius, because they are the only ones who've actually fought Mobius. While Barda did create the distraction, Mr. Miracle was able to talk to Ultraman and try to figure out exactly what Mobius's plan was, in which Ultraman replied to kill every single one of them. So while Big Barda was providing the distraction, a blast happened. She let them know, and they went down the hallway to see that the Power Ring had completely taken over Jessica Cruz, hacked into Cyborg, and caused Superwoman to hit Mr. Miracle and Barda with her heat rays. At this point, Owlman basically said that the Crime Syndicate and the Justice League needed to work together in order to stop Mobius. After that, they helped defeat Grail and Darkseid. After the war was over, Barda revealed that she had to make a few things happen in order to keep Apocalypse where it was at. One of the things was Lex Luthor becoming ruler. The other thing was Barda returning back to the Furies as their leader. Because she didn't want Scott to be hurt or anything like that, she decided to stay and still be the leader for the Furies, which basically left him heartbroken. At some point, Prime Earth Scott, or New Earth Scott, whichever one it was, got affected by the anti-life equation, with unexplained circumstances of how that happened. And it basically showed him this super normal life that he had with Barda. And then he was called to action by his half-brother Orion to go up against his father and Darkseid in the new Genesis Apocalypse War. During Doomsday Clock, which was several years after their split, Barda ended up coming back to Earth to be with Scott, mainly due to Lex Luthor's failure to run Apocalypse, which gave her the opportunity to escape and come back to Earth. And in this storyline, several costume heroes from an alternate Earth showed up to get one of their own who had remade the DC Universe's reality, and that was Dr. Manhattan. So the Scott-Free of New Earth is very similar. The only real difference was that when Barda also escaped to be with Scott, Darkseid was still interested in capturing the both of them. And it was this Earth, New Earth Scott, who had the anti-life equation, which Darkseid did not know, but his will was so strong he was able to resist the power to use it. At some point in time, he was also the leader of New Genesis in the wake of the High Father's death. However, he turned the god powers and position over to Tachyon with the help of Shazam because he really didn't want to feel tied down with the constraints of that type of leadership. While he was on Earth, him and Barda did work with Orion, and then all three of them were also part of the Justice League. He did retire and was a retired member of the Justice League, and Shiloh Norman ended up taking up the mantle after that. So Big Barda ended up getting murdered in the Death of the New Gods storyline, and following that murder of Barda, Scott became increasingly unstable. He changed his uniform to a darker version, and he flung himself into the investigation, which was being conducted by Orion and Superman, and he thought really Orion did it. Now, during the investigation, he found the dead bodies of the Forever People and used the anti-life equation to resurrect their soulless bodies to find out who murdered them. However, rather than tell, they dissolved their own bodies. Finally, Scott and Superman decided to confront Orion about it, and he was, trying to, answer the questions, but Scott allowed the anti-life equation to take over his body so that he could kill Orion. But Orion revealed that he was trying to draw the murderer out. But they ended up traveling to the source wall, where they found a second source wall composed of the dead bodies of the new gods. Superman revealed that the murderer posing as Hyman was actually the Infinity Man, and Scott allowed the anti-life equation to take him over so that he could try to kill the Infinity Man. However, Infinity Man was an agent of the Source trying to unite all anti-life. So it was discovered that the Source was trying to create a fifth world and needed to kill the new gods in order to do so. So when Scott found this out, he was completely broken, that he had basically threw all of his principles out of the window to avenge his wife. So at this point, he is just broken and distraught and allows the Source to kill him. He does, however, get resurrected with the new gods on Fifth World. This, of course, brings us to our third Mr. Miracle, Shiloh Norman. So he was abandoned by his mother when he was an infant and ended up in an orphanage. His desire to escape just helped him develop escape artist skills. He eventually met Thaddeus Brown and Scott Free and assisted Scott in avenging the murder of Thaddeus. Later, Shiloh had learned that he had an older brother who was a police officer named Aaron and tried to make a connection with him. While they did have some sort of a connection, the bonding was cut short when a gang member did kill Aaron, and Shiloh was placed in Scott Free's custody. He did escape so that he could exact his revenge on the people who killed his brother. However, Barda and Scott were able to stop him from doing something he would regret. He ended up going to NYU studying comparative philosophy and physics. And at some point or a few times, he also stood in for Scott as Mr. Miracle. But he did decide to put his escape artistry to the test while he was working as a security guard at the Slab. And this, of course, was super instrumental in stopping the Last Laugh riots. Following the riots, of course, he was promoted to warden of the Slab. He then went public with his escape artistry skills, becoming Mr. Miracle and becoming famous and getting a lot of money, but developing anxiety. So during this period when he was becoming a celebrity, he developed anxiety, and a lot of his stunts, like borderline suicidal. He tried to do a final attempt to escape a artificially generated black hole. In this black hole, he had experienced a fictional version of the real world, and he had become involved in the affairs of the new gods, who were now living in human bodies on Earth after the war in heaven. Darkseid and his associates had become powerful in the New York underground, and the new gods were like homeless people and vagrants. When Shiloh did fight Darkseid, he was exposed to the anti-life equation, but he was saved by Metron. Even though he was saved, Darkseid had Shiloh beaten, burned, castrated, mutilated, and exposed him to the Omega Sanction. Trapped within the Omega Sanction, he was exposed to several false lives. Each false life ended in doom and heartbreak, and while he continued to go through these false lives, he got stronger and was even able to convince the physical embodiment of Omega to let him go. Even though he had escaped a week prior, Shiloh realized that he was still inside of the black hole. Metron appears in front of him and lets him know that he has survived the initiation of the new gods, and basically wants him to go further and save the world. After about 7 days, he emerges in the middle of New York in the middle of the Sheeta invasion. He immediately went to the Darkseid Club and found out that it was a trap set for him by Darkseid. He ended up making a deal with Darkseid, which was his freedom for Oracles. Darkseid took this deal, freed Oracles, shackled Norman and or Shiloh, and shot him. However, Shiloh's mysterious mother box allowed him to survive, and he climbed out of his own grave 3 days later. And then Shiloh aided Firestorm in the fight against the forces of Apocalypse. During Final Crisis, Shiloh had approached Sunny Sumo in order to recruit him against Darkseid. Shiloh ended up working with a super young team against Darkseid after Darkseid took control of the world. He led the team in a final attack against the Checkmate strongholds and ended up being shot by a trigger-happy pawn. Fortunately, he was wearing an impact-proof suit and was able to inform the Earth's resistance about Darkseid's intentions and how to stop him. Later on, Shiloh, Sunny, and the super young team were summoned by Nyx Guatan to go up against the Dark Monitor. When it comes to powers and abilities, all of them have the ability, as escape artists. They're all escape artists and, have acrobatics, indomitable will, things like that. But when it comes to power, Mr. Miracle scot-free is the only one that has some. So due to growing up in Granny Goodness's orphanage, Scott-Free has excellent hand-to-hand combat skills. He has genius level intellects, several gadgets, escapeology, and he has something called the Alpha effect, which is the antithesis to the Omega effect that Darkseid has. And with the Alpha effect, he's able to do things like bringing people back to life, healing everybody, completely controlling energy to an almost boundless degree. And then, of course, he's a new god, so he has new god physiology. And that is Mr. Miracle.